Execute on my command, do not wait for council ratification, growled Arch-Commander Varnal Threx, his three-jointed hand slamming against the ridged console. The room fell into a pressurized hush, air circulation systems faintly shifting the wall panels as if they too hesitated. The chamber at Core Vadran Strategic Command pulsed with layered light, tiered displays flickering through territorial breach overlays, fleet dispersal vectors, and a dead center, Earth. A sphere riddled with orbital fractures, pinging zero coherent defense broadcasts. Across the sidewall, a slow-moving ring of debris turned, matching real-time satellite collapse rates. The assembly had been watching Earth rot in silence. Now it would act. They've lost central coordination. The sovereign collapse fractured 12 continental command arms. Internal broadcast hubs are reduced to region-locked subnets, stated Operative Trill, his mandibles clicking dryly between syllables as he zoomed in on decaying signal relays over Eastern Europe. Zero orbital shielding, no hull mass projection signatures, their last active carrier decompressed near Phobos 3 years ago. It wasn't replaced. Varnell turned toward the central display. Then we proceed. Earth is no longer a player. It's a prize. Through the tinted ceiling plates above him, artificial starlight flickered across the mirrored cityscape of the Vadran core. Gliders traced luminescent rings between towers. He watched their paths narrow, eyes narrowing with them. They've stopped issuing diplomatic objections. The trade accords are null, said High Scribe Irelin from her lower console pit, her voice curt, her tone absent of pity. All protest delegates recalled. Resource scarcity has choked every outbound channel. Earth is not negotiating. Earth is falling inward. The core chamber refracted her words into cold consensus. Speakers around the room repeated terms in staggered intervals. Annexation viability, preemptive fleet placement, passive resistance probabilities. Earth, in their eyes, had become inert mass. A thing, not a polity. Yet Earth's image, flickering on the primary screen, refused to look inert. The cloud cover had thickened, wrapped in deep rotation spirals. Storm bands coiled across the equator like orbital scarring. Cities blinked in uneven power grids. The planet looked like a bruised animal, not a dead one. From the Vadran perspective, though, it was over. 17 outer colonies had already voted to approve planetary absorption. The Central Phalanx had committed a fifth of its supply cluster. Combat projections displayed a conquest time of under 6 hours, barring anomalies. There had been no reply to their first warning probe. On Earth, however, someone had noticed. In an underground operations bay once belonging to the defunct Pacific Command, a technician named Arlen Vosk leaned over a cracked interface panel. Dust rimmed every surface. Half the lighting had failed weeks ago. A single analog beacon blinked green on the far console, looping an error code that hadn't existed in any database since 2432. Vosk leaned in, jaw tightening. "This isn't ours," he muttered. No one else in the room stirred. Most terminals ran sleep loop diagnostics or replayed outdated crisis drills. Earth's Defense Coordination Bureau, if it still functioned, did so through legacy routines. Subroutines stacked atop contingency loops designed for other wars, other decades. Vosk adjusted the knobs on the side panel, manually isolating the frequency. The signal had not originated from a surface broadcast, nor from orbit. It pulsed in a timed analog rhythm. Uncompressed, recursive. "I need a manual key strip," he called out, voice rising. "This signal predates the Accord collapse." The man beside him, an older officer with a synthetic ocular graft, glanced up. "That strip hasn't been used since Harbin Base went offline. Where's it coming from?" "Siberia," Vosk said. "Plateau sector. Deep reserve zone. Nothing supposed to be active there." The officer straightened. then it isn't nothing. In orbit, the Vadran recon frigate Arx Velen drifted at an angled descent posture, its belly open to Earth's southern hemisphere. Inside the command module, Pilot Lieutenant Corin Vesk calibrated the targeting displays. Surface defenses nil, atmospheric density at 12.3. We're clear to initiate vector align. The nav interface sputtered. Not electronically. The onboard heads-up display fractured into erratic grid overlays. Multiple ground zones returned false positive deflection readings. A triangular blind spot formed over eastern Russia, static building like pressure behind a wall. Corin smacked the display frame with the side of his wrist. What the? Central on getting blackout signatures at upper stratosphere non-conforming. Define non-conforming, came the sharp reply. Corin leaned forward. They're not suppressing us. They're skipping us. It's like something rerouted our sync burst. The comms feed cracked. Through the viewport, Earth's limb shimmered with atmospheric distortion. Bands of refracted light tracing a narrow corridor, too exact for weather. Corin's breath caught as he saw the shape forming beneath the permafrost. Not a launch, not a detonation, a geometric rise. Like a pillar ascending without origin, he whispered, more to himself than the crew. Something's lifting. From under the ice. Back at the Vadran core chamber, a new advisory window blinked red. Annexation, confirmation protocol issued. A diplomat from the Zithran Axis spoke into the delegation relay. Earth formally reclassified as non-defensive territory. Transition expected within one orbital cycle. Varnal Threk's voice turned colder. Transmit annexation directive across galactic grid. Include enforcement clause. Civil fleets are to comply under open space engagement parameters. No sovereign channel needed. One of the aides frowned. Counselor, Earth hasn't responded to any probes. They won't, Threx said. Their systems are dead. Inside a forgotten Cold Age facility, buried beneath permafrost and ice. A single copper coil began to heat. No explosion, no broadcast. A machine woke, alone, analog, unobserved. The Vadran's directive tore through the stars, relayed via quantum mirrors and folded data waves. It reached Earth's orbital shell in under 5 seconds. It struck null servers, nothing pinged back. Then Earth's sky cracked in silence. And someone, somewhere, started listening. Level shift detected. Coil channels are responding. Sequence integrity, holding. The technician's voice cut through the pressurized chamber like a blade drawn across frost. Beneath the Siberian plateau, 60 meters below glacial bedrock, a buried interface array came alive after 4 decades of programmed sleep. Its copper relays, braided and soldered by human hands long extinct, responded with slow pulses, time-beaten but obedient. A panel hissed open, steam billowing out from the release vents, wrapping the room in a dense fog. The air tasted mineral-rich, dense from years without exchange. No alarm sounded. No signals left the room. The protocol forbade it. On the far wall, 3 copper rods rotated 1 degree. Beneath them, a rotating armature stamped a physical seal onto a polymer strip. Dormant Bastion Protocol. Black ink, no translation. The lettering burned faintly under the emergency phosphor lights, like a relic reasserting its claim. Geothermal clockwork gears powered by planetary friction pressed against buried valves. Subsurface turbines began rotating without permission, tapping currents that had been rerouted from a hydrothermal sink sealed during the Saturn conflicts. No modern system monitored this zone. It existed outside Earth's digital grid, outside Vadran surveillance, outside recorded memory. At the core of this chamber stood a deep well vault. Its outer casing resembled the shell of a relic spacecraft, angled and scorched. Not for space, not for movement, just containment. On its surface, A faint emblem, an Earth crest etched into pre-polymer ceramic, half erased by geological stress. The vault's faceplate began rotating. One lock disengaged, then a second, then 30 more, each one timed to a 10-year gear cycle. Inside the vault, past triple-sealed magnetic stasis barriers and layered thermal insulation, rested the dreadnought Harrogate. Its hull was dusted with sediment carried in on manual servitors. The ship bore no registry mark, no flag, no encryption lattice. It was a creature of steel alloy and analog guts, meant to operate without trust, built to outlast civilization. The Harrogate hadn't launched since 2454. Its last listed assignment, evacuation cover fire during the Mars exodus. It had never returned to Earth through any official orbital registry. The decision not to dismantle it had been made by 4 men inside a collapsing command station as the outer colonies fell. One of those men had been Tarn Vexen. His cryobed clicked open like a sealed tomb breached by mistake. The release gas rolled upward, clinging to the inside of the chamber dome. His chest jerked once, then again, his muscles fighting the memory of zero movement. Ice crystals fell from his eyebrows in brittle flakes. Sensors embedded under his spine recorded neural response rates. His breath dragged like a chain across gravel. Vitals restored, intoned a monotone from the headboard, an offline relay voice, built to function with no uplink. A slot opened near his hand, revealing a thin panel bearing 2 words, etched not displayed. Deny escape. Vexen didn't speak. His fingers trembled once, then stopped. The ice coating his neck cracked as he sat upright. His first visual was the ceiling above him, layered lead plating, sealed with resin that had gone yellow with age. Every joint in his body throbbed, but the pain grounded him. He knew this place. He remembered its birth. The crew began waking one by one, none with announcements. The activation sequence followed a precise rotation. Comms officer, power chief, weapons coordinator, then engineering. 11 beds total. 10 remained occupied. 1 stayed sealed. Status panel dark. Lieutenant Garon Mech hadn't survived stasis. Vexen stood barefoot on the grated floor, skin against cold alloy, spine aching. His uniform, folded gray anonymous, waited on a sealed rack. He dressed without hurry. Cryothaw taught patience. So did failure. He made his way to the observation well, passing rows of inactive servitors, each shaped like human workers, built with no uplink capabilities. They moved only by pulse triggers. Half of them had rust on their joints. It didn't matter. Behind the viewport, the Harrogate sat dormant, its dorsal fins folded, its spinal cannon covered in a dust tarp. An engineer knelt beside the forward bay, prying open an analog diagnostic hatch with a manual crowbar. There were no digital displays here. Only instruments, switches, levers with weight. Vexen descended into the main hangar. "Captain," someone said behind him. He turned. Officer Halvin Ruhr, once his comms chief, now pale and gaunt, eyes bloodshot from stasis burns. "We're online," Ruhl said. "Mostly. Reactor still on slow cycle, but power cells are stable. Grav coil is clean, fusion buffer hasn't decayed. External signature remains buried. The AI? Non-existent. Just the Ghost protocol and route sequencing engine. Ship's yours to drive by hand." Vexen nodded. That was the design. That had always been the design. No synthetic oversight, no corruption. Harrogate wasn't a weapon, it was a refusal, machined into form. In the crew chamber, the others sat in silence, sipping electrolyte from copper flasks. Each man held a data wafer, 1 page, handwritten, sealed in polymer. Their assignment: conditions of awakening, no mission brief. Just a location, a timeline, and 3 operational words: deny, contain, seal, They understood what it meant. Commander Vexen stood at the helm's edge as the main bridge lights warmed into life. The heads-up displays flared in sequence, illuminating system tags marked obsolete in every global directory. The voice that activated them was familiar, his own, recorded 20 years prior. Herigo Core coming online. Manual sync, no AI authority. Control to captain. He stared at the console. System integrity? Partial. You'll have to fly her without finesse, said Chief Torvenvale from the engineering post, cracking his knuckles one at a time. Everything's still connected, nothing's graceful. Good, Vexen replied. We're not here to impress, we're here to erase. The core dial glowed red. External relay sensors pinged off permafrost above. The magnetic corridor realigned. The launch shaft had already begun to warm. Beneath Earth's skin, a warship breathed again. Harrogate had slept through empires falling and governments forgetting. Now, stirred not by revenge, but by design. It prepared for emergence. And its captain, once silenced, now remembered the warning no one had heeded. He placed his hand on the launch lever. Ready route confirmation. Confirmed, said Roar. Surface breach scheduled in 10. Vexen didn't look up, his hand tightened. Seal the vault. We leave the world below as it is. We only answer the sky. Comm sweeps bouncing back like we're pinging fog. That's not interference. It's echoing from nothing. Commander Zeth Overon of the Vatran suppression fleet narrowed his focus, scanning the vertical bands of his heads-up telemetry. Interference waves, set to blanket Earth's communication shell in coordinated bursts, had begun returning contradictory feedback. Some regions absorbed the data as expected, others redirected it. And then there were the anomalies, ghost reflections, silent voids, unsynced feedback loops. None of it followed predictive drift patterns. Relay that scan again, use lateral rebounding through Saturn's delay band. Overon ordered, stepping toward the aft console where his tactical chief hesitated. We've got phase distortion building over Sector 12, the chief muttered. Can't trace origin, there's no uplink, no emission, it's bouncing on copper layers. Copper? Overon turned sharply. That material hasn't been used in communications for centuries. Tell that to whatever's rewriting our pulse signatures. From the outer viewport, Earth appeared fractured, lines of flickering discharge racing across its surface in jagged bursts. Entire continents blinked off the map, one sector at a time, like a memory collapsing frame by frame. Power grid overlays stuttered, thermal markers dipped, orbital telemetry collapsed. Yet, there was no heat surge, no pressure spike, no electromagnetic spike consistent with military jamming. Instead, their systems reported a calm blanket of noise, except inside those blackened bands, where there was nothing. In the basement of an abandoned energy regulation station beneath Eastern Europe, a rack of copper-bound relay terminals switched open, one after the next. These were not modern machines. They ran on gear-timed protocols and rotary timers built before the first Mars contact. Dust coated their surfaces, but the internal mechanisms clicked into motion like ancient organs rediscovering blood flow. Each node connected to a hard-wired relay tube that spanned multiple decommissioned bunkers, silent tunnels forgotten by both war and peace. A pulse wave moved through the system. The timing was irregular by design. Nothing aligned on a digital clock. A few meters above, a family sheltering in the ruins of an old research station heard a sharp ticking rise from the floor beneath them, like coins dancing on metal sheeting. The youngest child pressed her ear to the tile and whispered, "It's knocking." In orbit, Vatran fleet technicians scrambled. Phalanx 4 is reporting alignment collapse, came a breathless voice from Tactical Deck 12. Orbital rotation has lost sync with suppression field. 5 kilometers of vertical drop across one quadrant, their stabilization grid misaligned. Realign them. Fire Pulse 3, barked Oberon. It was Pulse 3, sir. Civilian footage began leaking. From outposts in Africa, Brazil, Mongolia, grainy feeds showed the sky ripple, then break into jagged seams like fractured glass. Some described static without crackle. Others captured power lines swaying, though there'd been no wind. In one clip, a column of atmosphere above Siberia moved, folding in on itself before snapping still. Then came the tremors. Deep beneath the Siberian plateau, Harrogate stirred. The rail shaft, buried since the Saturn conflicts, had fused into the terrain under decades of ice. Now the electromagnetic supports re-engaged. Ion conduits hissed beneath concrete joints. Stabilizer arms detached, falling into support pits with blunt metallic groans. The vault's cradle disengaged. Twin locking arms rotated clockwise until final seal disarmed. Drive magnetic sequence through track line 7, Vexen commanded from the bridge, gripping the stabilizer rail as the ship began to tilt upward, gravity recalibrating. Pressure's building along spine corridor, reported Chief Vale, staring at the heads-up relay map. We're skimming the shaft by 2 meters. Realignment required in 5 seconds. Let the walls burn, Vexen replied. We surface on time or not at all. Above, the permafrost plateau buckled, not from an impact, but from a rising force that carried no kinetic trail. Entire trees tilted at strange angles, herds of animals scattered. The ice cracked, not along a single fault line, but in a hexagonal ring that widened with each pulse. Steam burst through seams, snowbanks inverted. The Harrogate moved upward, silent, massive, unyielding. No warning flare, no sonic burst. The launch was not a launch, it was an unveiling. Within its control cradle, Vexen watched the walls melt away as the upper shaft opened. Light, natural, gray, unfiltered, streamed into the forward viewport. His crew held their positions, fingers steady over manual controls. Not one spoke. Above them, the sky began to lose its stars. Not because it turned dark, because sensors on every Vodran ship failed to show anything rising. Commander, the plateau just fractured. It didn't explode, it lifted, said the Vodran observer in orbit, voice pitched with confusion. We don't have a radar ping. There's no emission line. Something's there. It's blocking sky reflections. Avron pushed forward. Launch fire probe. Mark the coordinates. If they've activated surface artillery, we wipe it. The fire probe launched, a micro-thruster shell with a calibrated sensor array meant to trigger any defensive field. It crossed the upper stratosphere smoothly until it simply vanished, not destroyed, not jammed, just erased from telemetry. Overon stared at the screen. Is it gone? No, sir, it's there. It's being masked by analog interference. That's not possible, Overon growled. We cleared Earth of sub-analog systems a century ago. The plasma interface beside him cracked. Harrogate cleared the final magnetic rail and hovered, weightless, dark, unmarked. It bore no launch signature, no electronic ID. It broadcast nothing. It was not a warship to sensors. It was absence incarnate. Inside the bridge, lights steadied. We've breached surface. Magnetic lift disengaged. Hull temperature within parameters. We're clear, Vale said quietly. Vexen exhaled through his nose. Then we're seen. Not yet, Roar muttered. They'll need eyes to know, and we're not giving them time. Harrogate rotated without sound, locking its trajectory southward. Under its hull, microvents dispelled pressure as frost peeled away from the outer armor. Snow flurries swirled around its shape, vanishing in unnatural spirals. Even the wind couldn't settle on its surface. Below, the fracture ring closed. From orbit, the only indication something had occurred was a sudden blank spot on every Vodran scan, a hole that didn't return readings. Just silence. Vexen stepped forward, looking out through the viewplate. We're not flying for defense, he murmured. The crew waited. He turned toward them. We're here for the unthinkable. and the Harrogate advanced into open sky, unrecorded, unchallenged, and absolutely certain of its purpose. Open the spine, we breathe her back, or she dies with us in orbit. Commander Tarn Vexen's voice cut through the bridge chamber, dry but unwavering. Below his boots, the deck groaned as power relays spun into full cycle, coaxing warmth into conduits dormant since the solar concord fell. The Harrogate was now airborne, but dormant steel and human blood had not yet become a single machine. That process, always brutal, always personal, was now underway. Behind him, Chief Torvin Vale hauled open a rust-seamed panel beside the navigation throttle. Inside, bundled coolant lines hissed violently, coughing vapor in irregular spurts. The taste of iron coated every breath. Valve seals cracked in his hands as he worked each feed by touch. No automation cushioned the effort. This was a ship that demanded flesh. Life support filters halfway operational. We're running on old oxygen tanks until the converters finish waking, Vale grunted. Then hold your breath sparingly, said Rule, half joking, wiping condensation from the comms board with his forearm sleeve. The hallway lights flickered in pulses, no two syncing the same. Power trickled unevenly, like blood fighting its way through frozen veins. Rust curled up from the corners of sealed hatches. The bulkheads moaned as pressure stabilized. Slowly, water condensed along the ceiling struts and ran down in rivulets, smearing decades of dust. Lieutenant Bram Isaac tried to sit upright at his console. He made it halfway before his arms buckled. He dropped to one knee, coughing wetly into his palm. I can't feel my spine. You were sealed for over 40 years, Vexen answered. You're lucky your lungs work. I don't need lungs to read trajectories, Isaac muttered. Just fingers, and a line of sight. No mistakes, said Vexen without turning. We fire only once. Far from the bridge, in the forward weapon shaft, Technician Del Wren moved hand over hand along a ceiling pipe, dragging a cable reel longer than a tram car. The crew had no drones. Every feed had to be pulled by muscle. Every system linked without delay buffer. Sparks flew when his wrench scraped the ignition contact. A sudden screech sounded from overhead, bulkhead steel warping under stress. The walls hadn't flexed since the Mars evacuation. Del paused, hand hovering mid-air. Behind him, a servitor blinked awake. Its optical feed buzzed, then sharpened. It said nothing. It simply handed him a toolbox and stepped back. Creepy bastard, Del whispered, still beats protocol liaisons. In the command vault above, Vexen stared down at the sealed order packet embedded in his console. It had not been decoded yet. It did not contain an enemy profile, nor a fallback condition. Its encryption required retinal confirmation and a biometric pulse match only attainable after launch. He leaned in. The seal broke. Inside, 3 lines of black text. Deny exfil, deny regroup, deny legacy. His knuckles whitened around the edge of the console. That wasn't a battle order. It was a burial sentence. He remembered the last civilian transport leaving Olympus Mons. The engines had stuttered mid-descent. His team had sealed the final launch deck behind a riot line. He'd told them they'd be relieved within 40 hours. Then came the blackout. The relief never arrived. The families never landed. They'd buried the guilt under cryoseals and protocol layers. Now it came crawling back, written in cold directives. Behind him, Ruhr tapped into the data archives. Flat-wave storage cores, insulated from time and network bleed. He inserted his access strip and let the heads-up display load centuries-old family logs. The room dimmed. Names floated across the screen, tagged with death indicators, disappearance dates, or blank fields. Crew members leaned in to see their pasts reduced to lines of static. Your brother made it to Europa. He built a weather dome, someone whispered to another. My wife was on the phalanx, another replied, face unreadable. This was? Baylink's registry was archived post-correction. The platform fell during the drift year. Vexen didn't check his own file. He already knew. Instead, he stood before the Marrow engine. The chamber was sealed in layered ceramic, ridged with magneto-insulated conduits. A transparent barrier showed the internal spindle, an elongated crystal buried in a gyroscopic socket. It did not glow. It pulsed in a color no normal spectrum captured. Not light, not radiation, something stranger. Something shelved long ago for what it did to time compression systems. "Power it up," he said. Chief Vale hesitated. "We still don't know the outer field radius when this thing runs hot. Doesn't matter. If it works, they won't know we're coming." He turned to the systems board. The launch route had already recalculated around the South Atlantic anomaly, a distortion zone ignored by Vadran scanners due to its unstable geoshift readings. "Run stealth engagement protocols. We enter beneath their drift line, not above it." "You're using the anomaly for surface masking?" Ruhr raised a brow. "We use what Earth never fixed." Below the hull, the Harrogate's armor shifted. Cooling flaps adjusted to realign with Earth's magnetic orientation. External surface temperature dropped 15 degrees in under a minute, cloaking the vessel in electromagnetic silence. The servitors stowed their tools. Internal lights dimmed, leaving red overlays across navigation decks. Every sound now had weight. Every action carried consequence. Vexen stepped to the center dais. Every man was seated. Every eye was forward. The moment had arrived not with horns or fanfare, but in restraint and readiness. "Status?" he asked. "Weapon banks preloaded, power coil stable. Spinal cannon in standby," said Del Ren. "Telemetry functional within analog parameters," Bram Isak added. "Shielding not active. They won't see us until it's too late," Ruhr confirmed. Vexen placed one hand on the throttle brace. The other hovered above the nav panel. "Prepare for emergence," he said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "The tactical radios?" Vale asked. Vexen's eyes locked on the external pathfinder. "Chaos only. They're running docking rotations, no escort configuration, no outer flanks." Vexen's voice held a cold edge as he leaned closer to the targeting scope, studying the drifting shapes ahead. 36 Vadran logistics vessels hovered in staggered formation near Lagrange Point 7, engines idling, power dispersal spread unevenly across lateral arrays. They looked unconcerned, unshielded, relaxed. The Harrogate had risen beneath them like an ancient predator from bent space-time. Quiet, unseen, unnoticed. The Vadran rear lines believed themselves in sanctuary. "They think their forward fleet owns the sky," muttered Ruhr from the comms node. "They left the back door open." "They didn't leave it open," Vexen replied. "They never imagined anyone would come knocking from the grave." Behind the command deck, Harrogate's deepwave channel rotated into alignment. Cold fusion compressors pumped rhythmic bursts into the transmission core, bleeding encoded pulses into subspectrum layers. No encryption, no signature. The signal wasn't designed to mimic Earth. It was tailored to simulate corrupted Vadran chatter. "Marrowfield standing by, deepwave distortion in sync," reported Bram Isak. "Signal configured to match a defector's log. Smuggled it from their doctrine archive, 20 years old." "Make it louder," Vexen ordered. "Let the silence break them from within." The ship exhaled. From the Vadran perspective, their rear net began receiving scrambled IFF flags. Identifiers marked friendly but malformed, emerging from ships that should have been ahead of them. Drones responded automatically, redirecting to scan what they perceived as compromised allies. Defense turrets rotated inward, expecting a cloaked breach. Onboard AI systems failed to parse the origin. The signal didn't follow any known language, yet it matched core response values. Some ships switched to broadcast override, others cut power entirely to prevent data bleed. In the chaos, automated defense logic buckled. One of the central tankers launched countermeasures without prompting. Its twin neighbor, confused by the discharge, locked on to the flare signature and returned fire. The result? A direct strike to a civilian freighter in the rear. Confirmed hit, Del Rain muttered from Harrowgate's sensor wing, watching thermal bursts spike across the laser plasma map. That wasn't ours. They're hitting themselves. Update targeting windows, Vexen said calmly. We'll strike while they're still deciding who betrayed whom. At the edge of Harrowgate's dorsal shaft, mechanical hatches opened to release a series of unguided objects. Rough asymmetric shapes, coated in dust. Their thermal emission nullified, propulsion absent. They tumbled slowly into field view, caught in Earth's low-orbit draft. On scanners, they resembled debris, satellite carcasses, spent rocket shells, harmless ruin. Analog pods away, Ruhr confirmed. Non-emitting, cold profiles. Within minutes, 3 Vadran interceptor drones broke formation to intercept the decoys. Their laser arrays charged. Each bot fired into the drifting shapes with textbook efficiency, registering simulated kill logs and logging sensor achievement codes. Then the debris didn't vaporize. It spun in place, unscratched, unfazed. What the hell did they hit? Vale whispered. Those aren't even military casings. That's the point, Vexen replied. If they can't destroy shadows, how can they predict fire? Beneath the false attacks, Harrowgate's spinal cannon rotated 2 degrees north. Its power nodes glowed blue under the reinforced keel plating. Every targeting solution completed without digital logic. Mechanical levers adjusted through gyroscopic dampers. Each alignment check was manual, each correction made by hand. Isek worked the calculation panel. They're trying to recalibrate friend-foe parsing. Half the fleet is offline. Command structures fragmenting. Confirmed? Vexen asked. 2 crossfire events, 1 accidental docking collision, 5 interceptors launched at their own comm relay. Outside the viewport, bursts of heatless light exploded in random vectors. Earth's orbital shell remained untouched. Vadran ships spun like vultures, confused by their own circling. Targeting complete, Del said. Fireline lock? Vexen asked. Confirmed. Static alignment. Atmospheric bounce, synchronized. Vexen stepped forward and placed his hand over the Marrow engine's activation brace. The crystal at the core of the weapon pulsed once, responding to his biometric pressure. Its surface shimmered, not with heat or glow, but like a membrane reacting to unseen pressure. It's not just misidentification, Ruhl said, scanning the drift data. They've begun avoiding each other entirely. They don't trust their own telemetry. Then we've won without speaking, Vexen muttered. Let them fight shadows. The heads-up display flickered. A large Vadran hauler began spinning uncontrollably, struck by 2 pulse beams from its own defense ring. Communication bursts attempted to reroute its trajectory. Nothing stabilized. It clipped the edge of a transport and shattered into hundreds of jagged projectiles. On the bridge of Harrowgate, no one celebrated. No cheers. Only the quiet rhythm of men doing a task carved into their bones. You don't fight modern empires with stronger weapons, Vale said, more to himself than the crew. Vexen didn't answer. His eyes were on the ignition panel. His fingers gripped the locking ring, twisting until the catch broke. The Marrow engine initialized. Power bled into the conduit rail. Containment systems disengaged. Ripple moved through the entire vessel. Not sound, not vibration. The feeling of pressure tightening on skin, like gravity becoming aware. 10 minutes to ignition cascade, Isek reported. We're in the window. Trajectory? Vexen asked. Unchanged. We'll emerge within 3,000 clicks of their forward supply funnel, outside their triangulation range. The bridge darkened. Red lines traced the route through Earth's shadow, threading the Harrowgate along a dead corridor in their orbital net. Vexen looked toward the viewport one last time, watching as Vatran ships blinked, burned, and broke. None of them able to say who fired first. Hold formation, he said. The dead don't rush. Now, Vexen said, twisting the ignition throttle with a controlled snap. At the center of Harrowgate's reinforced chamber, the Marrow engine surged to life. Its outer housing expanded subtly as inner containment fields collapsed inward, an inversion not visible, not audible, but physically registered through every vertebra. The bridge lights dipped, not a flicker. A compression. Even the air grew heavier, as though time had leaned forward without explanation. Containment coil is bending. Vale called out, watching a dial needle bend past its red marker. She's running dark, we have inversion. The ripple hit space like a dropped weight into a frozen pond. Earth's outer quantum relay layer, the bandwidth shell through which Vadran's ships coordinated, fractured. Not exploded, not jammed, disassembled. It seemed to the bridge commanders that the bridge was purple clay, dissembling, but not dry. Across their flotilla, message loops broke into recursive gibberish. Sync beacons responded with endless reinitiation requests. Core command threads fragmented midstream, looping back into their own checksum logs. Flagships tried routing orders. The orders returned as empty packets. At Harrowgate's forward viewport, the stars blinked erratically, not from occlusion, but from displaced reflection. The light between objects had twisted, compressed, undone. A tremor passed through the hull plating, like tension inside bone. Quantum mesh is gone, Isik reported. Not failing, gone. They're flying blind. On board the Vadran command cruiser Zareth Vol, panic spread in controlled pulses. Data teams shouted across the command pit as each node disconnected. One technician ran diagnostics 4 times. Each report returning different fleets listed as destroyed. Override protocols are refusing manual control, barked Sub-Admiral Tyvan Kor. Reinstate fleet harmonics. If we have to isolate command through pulse timing, do it now. Admiral, said the lead signal officer, pale and trembling. Every override channel is feeding back through itself. They're closing from inside. Weapons froze. Auto-guided interceptors, unable to confirm friendly routes, failed to launch. Turrets ran inert. Missile platforms spun aimlessly. The AI, trained to operate under command hierarchy, had no fallback for disconnected silence. They had never tested for Earth-running analog. They had never imagined it could work. Inside Harrowgate's bridge, the floor vibrated with rhythm, not mechanical, not natural. The kind of pulse that made hands shake. Roar adjusted his seat and leaned toward the comms array, still listening to dead frequencies. They haven't resynced, he said. They're broadcasting the same override command every 3 seconds, like someone will catch it. They won't, Vexen said. That's the mercy of digital blindness. Bale stood with hands wrapped around the support column. Weapon coils are charged, external casings holding. Internal shaft is stabilized. Then bring us within strike range, Vexen replied. Terrigi's analog propulsion ignited. No flare, no burn. It pulsed outward like an irregular heartbeat through void-slicked panels. The ship cut laterally, a drifting slab of forgotten doctrine, its motion calculated through hand-wired gyros rather than prediction matrices. There were no thruster curves. Only inertial shifts. An older kind of movement no sensor suite accounted for. The Dreadnought aligned itself behind the Vadran midline carriers. Supply ships stretched into chains, each linked by assumption, not design. They had been built to follow orders, not defend themselves. Vexen lowered the manual trigger cover. Target the logistics spine, snap the vertebrae, let the limbs flail. Spinal rod chamber is green, reported Isik. Firing track selected. Adjust elevation 2 degrees, Vexen said. We're not guessing, we're calculating. Beneath the hull, the spine rotated, locking into anchor struts. Inside the loading rail, titanium mass kinetic rods spun to velocity, each one longer than a Vadran patrol cruiser. No guidance, no tracking, only thrust and time. That was enough. Vexen pressed the contact switch. The first rod launched. The deck trembled once, not with sound, not from pressure, but from recoil. It tore through the void at impossible velocity, unannounced, invisible on modern radar systems, and struck the command relay cruiser Varen Lake mid-hull. From a distance, the cruiser appeared to pause mid-flight. Then it folded in half, its midsection ejected in two directions. No fire, no visible explosion, just structural obliteration. Elren watched the display update. They're trying to reassign control nodes, still relying on predictive protocol cascades. Old instincts, Vexen muttered. The worst kind in a crisis. He keyed the second shot. This time, the rod didn't strike the target vessel directly. It passed through the trailing tail of a fleet tractor, slicing cables, shattering signal extenders, bending the hull backward in slow, rotational collapse. By the time the vessel tore open, the rod had vanished into empty field. They've rerouted their defensive arrays, Isak said. Too late. They're firing at imaginary inputs. 3 turrets just misfired into each other, Vale added. Collision cascade initiated across their forward block. The heads-up map lit with impact trails. Earth's orbital field, once marked by passive heat blooms and retreat vectors, now swirled with wrong movements, misfires, retreats into friendly zones, evasive maneuvers away from ghosts. A junior comms tech on Harrowgate's third bench leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper carried across the bridge. They've never fought in silence before. Vexen stepped forward, eyes on the tactical display. Then let's teach them. He slammed the override lever into full release. All fire lines. Full spread. The rods launched in rhythm, no pattern, no volley formation, every vector calculated by dead math. Ships cracked open without heat, drones scattered without cause, defensive perimeters, built on predictability, unraveled. No signals, no warnings. Only the cold function of something built long before Earth decided to forget how to win. They're lighting retreat flares, multiple. Ruer's voice was even, but his eyes betrayed it, narrowed, flicking rapidly across the laser plasma interface. Their primary fleet's folding backward. They've abandoned orbital coverage. From the Harrowgate's command bay, the Vadran fleet resembled a panicked migration. Carriers broke from triangular hold, supply rings spun aimlessly, defensive platforms detached from escort rings without clearance. Some tried to re-enter synchronous orbit, others fled toward deep field vectors without confirmed exit lanes. They've got no comm grid, Isak said, tapping through calculations on the navigation scroll pad. Retreat orders are issuing blind. Some are turning toward their own backup units. Others don't know they've been left behind. Standard fallback protocols expect quantum harmony, Vale added. They've built their tactics on assumptions. Vexen stepped to the projection core, arms crossed, weight shifted slightly forward. The viewplate displayed fleets scatter across 3 hemispheres. There was no cohesion, just ripple patterns of evasion, each commander guessing where the others might run. They'll try to escape, Vexen murmured. Let's give them a door worth running through. He flicked a control brace downward. Activate lunar triangulation array. Below the bridge, buried deep in Harrowgate's analog core, a hidden interface flared green. Long dormant data relays engaged Earth's abandoned moon base, an obsolete installation, long presumed gutted. But deep within the lunar crust, 3 triangular signal towers remained intact, hand-built, mirror-aligned, and untouched by protocol upgrade. Moonbase relay active, Vale confirmed. Signal mirrors rotating, line of sight triangulation locked. Then give them a funnel, Vexen ordered. Let them think it leads home. Heads-up telemetry adjusted. The artificial corridor formed. A narrow wedge between Harrowgate's orbit and the Vadran fallback vectors. From the enemy's vantage, it resembled a safe escape passage. Clean trajectory, low interference. No conflict projections. Ruer's lips parted. You're baiting their warplanes? Every bird flies toward open sky, Vexen replied, but we own the sky's roof. The signal flare was released, broadcasted on an ancient carrier frequency, coded to mimic an unencrypted Earth emergency broadcast. It said nothing, just blinked green. 16 Vodran ships turned simultaneously, racing toward the fault's escape lane. Vale rotated toward the environmental console. Magnetic charge complete. Deliver the pulse, Vexen said. The Harrogate released a low-orbit electromagnetic burst. It didn't crackle, it didn't radiate. It caught. Thrust control nodes on approaching ships shorted in sequence. Navigational coils blinked off. Stabilizers detached under inertial pressure. The power curves failed to realign. They dropped, slowly at first, then spiraling, burning, uncontrollable. In the skies above Earth, civilians looked upward. From mountain peaks, desert plateaus, and dense metroplexes, they saw the streaks of glowing trails descending across the atmosphere. At first, they resembled meteor showers. Then, as fragments began to separate mid-fall, they realized the truth. Those weren't rocks. They were ships. Dozens, some still intact, some in pieces. All falling. In a refugee camp outside Kolkata, an elderly man stood from his cot and removed his respirator to see better. In Johannesburg, a mechanic stepped into the street, wrench still in hand, as flickers of flame crossed the high cloud line. On the rooftop of a silent broadcasting tower in Toronto, a teenager held up an old handheld camera. The footage would never be published. It would spread instead across unregulated feeds, looped, muted, rewatched endlessly, the sky tearing like paper, the false gods dropping in defeat. No government issued a statement. Not one channel activated a public defense siren. Nothing needed to be said. Everyone watching understood something had changed. Vexen walked alone through the side corridor of Harrogate's observation bay. The rest of the crew remained at stations, ensuring stabilization as the power discharge diffused. But Vexen wanted to see. He reached the narrow viewport, set between layered blast shielding, and stared down. Fire rained across the southern sky, streaking behind shattered vessels. Trails of dust and char burned into clouds. His reflection hovered beside the flame, a gaunt man in gray uniform, lit only by the defeat of an empire. Behind him, a voice. "Are we still at war?" Roar asked, barely audible. Vexen didn't turn. "We never left the battlefield," he said. "We buried it." Silence settled between them, thick and permanent. Back on the bridge, Vale watched the reactor levels return to dormant status. The coils stopped pulsing. Power began to shift into atmospheric shielding. The Marrow engine entered cool-down state. A hiss signaled the weapon's deactivation. Not by choice, but because its purpose had passed. Harrogate disengaging, Vale confirmed. Magnetic buffers realigning, orbit decay initiated. The ship, no longer needed above the clouds, began its slow descent. Thrusters fired sideways, rotating her hull toward Siberian coordinates. Inside, systems shut down in sequence. Heads-up overlays blinked out. Light dimmed from red to dusk gray. And Earth's last dreadnought, obsolete by design and victorious by doctrine, began returning home. Its mission complete. Its name still erased. "Cut Gravglide, take her vertical," Vexen ordered, his voice stripped of triumph, left only with clarity. Harrogate's descent path arced cleanly toward the Siberian entry vault, its coordinates remapped through an atmospheric bypass channel hard-coded into Earth's crust centuries prior. Cooling vents purged lingering charge from the Marrow engine. Beneath the ice fields, sensors registered the returning mass and triggered re-entry hatches to begin slow rotation, each gear tooth older than most nations now standing. The hull glided past glacial rim walls. Snow peeled from the reinforced slope above the launch aperture, carried by the ship's static envelope. Dust swirled where the cradle once cracked. Now, it welcomed its own again. Vale adjusted the forward stabilizers. Cradle lock established, structural latch accepting secondary ribs. Final descent in 20 seconds. On the bridge, the walls dimmed. Displays flickered once before falling to black. Power relays disconnected. The control core no longer required input. Delrin took one long breath, coughed into his palm, and finally sat down. Didn't think we'd make it through full recoil. You did, Vexen said. You always do. Ren didn't respond. He just leaned back and closed his eyes. Beneath them, the Harrogate settled. No ceremony, no recorded confirmation, just the sealed hiss of contact. Vault and hull fused again after half a century apart. The ship's systems, once stirred into violence, now returned to silence. Not shutdown, dormancy. That was the contract. Extraction personnel moved with practiced rhythm. No unit insignia, no tags. Every one of them bore the same standard gray surface suit, sleeves unmarked. They entered the Harrogate without conversation. Each man knew where to go. Each officer was escorted without restraint, without question. Outside, the cooling towers absorbed the final heat traces from the dorsal vents. Frost reclaimed the superstructure in slow, deliberate coils. Within minutes, the Harrogate disappeared beneath the reinforced plates again, buried not for failure, but for fulfillment. No refit was issued, no diagnostic scheduled. That, too, was part of the plan. Vexen stepped out last. He paused at the base of the decontamination lift, boots heavy with condensation, shoulders raw under the environmental seal. The interior lights cast long shadows. One of the extraction personnel raised a hand in salute. Not military, acknowledgement. Vexen didn't return it. They felt. The man lowered his hand. Roar approached from behind, still holding the last comms log from orbit. Not a single one made it through Earth's curtain. Not intact. Then they'll talk, Vexen said. They already are, Ruark replied. They're trying to find explanations, none of them align. That's the point, let them look for answers in places we've already buried. Vale joined them at the tunnel gate. He wiped a line of dried frost from his collar. What do we do now? We walk out, Vexen answered, and vanish again. And so they did. One by one, the Harrogate's crew passed into history's shadow. Not erased, not forgotten, misplaced deliberately. 3 hours later, inside the Defense Coordination Bureau's Black Line relay station beneath Geneva's neutral zone, a transmission was queued. It was short, no encryption. The message read, Earth's legacy assets remain in place. No additional tags, no origin trace. It arrived on the same signal loop the Vaudrins had jammed before their collapse. The message traveled far. Across independent command stations on orbital relays, across military cold bays on unregistered planetary installations, across black archives once believed destroyed during the collapse. Eventually it reached the Unified Vaudrin Assembly's recovery hall. In the lower wing of the Astral Intelligence Core on Herix 3, a young analyst sat alone at a relic data terminal. He wasn't part of the senior cartography division. He hadn't even cleared code Tier 2. But his job was to parse recovered military echoes and cross-rec them with projected threat models. Today, his stream included fragment logs from the Earth annexation collapse. He stared at the footage. Debris fields that defied standard impact velocity. Ships with navigation failure patterns too uniform to be natural. And a vessel, briefly registered, then scrubbed by its own reflection disruption, that had torn through logistics lines without aligning to known propulsion markers. He squinted at the artifact report. Dreadnought class. Obsolete. He scrolled further. Designation, not listed. The analyst frowned, leaned back, and whispered aloud, half questioning, half afraid of the answer. If that was their obsolete class, how many more have they buried? He didn't know that his query had already been flagged by an internal review system and auto-erased. He didn't know that Harrogate wasn't the last. Under a crater near Mars's southern pole, long dismissed as a collapsed mining zone, an object stirred. Frost flaked from its outer casing. Gravity stabilizers ran a readiness check. In its reactor core, a fusion chamber lit briefly. A spark flicked through it, then sustained. It waited. Silent, awaiting a signal no civilian would ever hear. A signal Earth had once vowed never to send again. They didn't need to. They had buried enough answers. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity's reach. Now it would learn to fear their memory. What would you do if your planet had buried weapons no one was ever meant to find again, only to awaken when the galaxy called Earth a relic? Comment your thoughts below. And if you want more gripping HFY stories where humanity doesn't just survive but rewrites the rules, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications.